Hello, hello, hello to you listening to me sing right now. You make me feel so proud. Okay, I was gonna try and make that work, but look, guys, to be honest, this is probably my 10th time recording this intro. All of them were probably great and fine and would have worked, but once I decide that the first recording isn't going well, none of them go well. So I'm just going to be transparent about that and see what happens with this one. I've missed you guys. I sometimes wish I was a person that could be more consistent about releasing episodes on a bi-weekly basis, like is the plan. And by sometimes, I mean all the time. I wish I was that way. But I just am not. And so part of me not releasing them consistently is an act of self-love and self-respect. So yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to say that. But today we have an episode. And by we, I mean all of us. And by all of us, I mean that I don't need to keep saying this and over-explaining. But hey, I'm a little rusty. What can I say? Today on the podcast, I interviewed professional astrologer, animal communicator, and medium, Jessica Lanyadoo. She is so fucking great. She is educated. She is friendly. And she is about to start talking to you. And by talking to you, I mean me. Yeah, I mean it. Is this intro also a mess? Probably. Do I care? Yeah, I do. Am I still going to release it? Yes, I am. So without me fucking this up anymore, I'm going to get on with it. And before I get on with it, I wanted to let you know that if you wanted to book an animal communication reading with me, the link to do that is in the bio of my Instagram page. That is at divine.dingo. You can follow the link there, go to the acuity scheduling page. If you don't see anything available for a time or date that works for you, you can either direct message me on Instagram and we can work something out, or you can send me an email to divinedingopodcast@gmail.com. I think that's all my announcements, other than I love you and you're perfect the way that you are. Unless you feel like you want to change, then maybe you should do some inner healing. And if you don't want to do that, then you should just eat some chocolate and listen to this episode. Okay, so I love to ask my guests, and it's interesting because you're the first official animal communicator I've had on, even though I know. And although I feel like everybody can communicate with animals, and so that's why I always start with this question, but I would love for you to tell me about maybe the first time you communicated with an animal, or a story about communicating with an animal that really stands out to you. It can be whatever. And I usually add a lot more context to this question to encourage people, but I don't need to do that with you.
No, you don't need to do it with me. It's true. I mean, the first time I was like, wait a minute, I am talking to an animal and the animal is responding. I was probably like 29 years old. So it was like 17 years ago, 16 years ago. And I had two cats, and I mean, there was probably a bunch of different experiences. I had this one cat, and his name was Cougar. He's now passed, but he really wanted a kitten. He told me he wanted a kitten, and I was like, "Am I making this up that my cat told me he wants a kitten?" Because I didn't want a second cat. I never wanted two cats at the same time because I was scared I couldn't love them equally, and I was just like freaked out by it, and so he told me he wanted a cat. He was telling me for months. And I was like, I don't know if this is nuts. Like, what am I doing? I think I'm getting a cat for my cat. And I remember I woke up one morning and it was like around the Christmas holidays. And I'm not Christian. I don't celebrate Christmas, but it was like, the energy in the air, the morphic field was strong with gift giving. And he was sitting, it was very cinematic. He was sitting on a chair at the kitchen table and he was facing me. And I swear to God, he practically shook his head in disappointment with me. And he was like, "You're never gonna get me a kitten." And I was like, "Oh." So I got him a kitten that day. And within a couple hours of them being together, they were grooming each other and snuggling, and they were just the best of friends ever since. So that was one of the first times where I was like, okay, he's definitely telling me things. It kind of advanced from there where we started to have more conversations where it wasn't like he was just asking me for something or I was just telling him to do something. But that's one story. It's not a story I typically tell.
Did you like hear his voice in your head?
Yeah. The way animal communication works for me is they either show me pictures or give me emotions or like kind of like talk. So I hear it in my head. And it's not, sometimes when I communicate with animals, their diction's very fucking particular and they're very like, no, I did not say she's depressed. I said she's sad. And then sometimes it's very general and very like, it's more like pictures. So it's kind of like with people in my experience, it's like different people communicate in different ways. And, that other kitten that I got who I love, they lived, they were with me for many years and they died a month apart. They were really in love. She didn't care for communicating with me. She didn't care for communicating. She was like, "Will you love me? Will you snuggle me? Will you give me food? Will you give me more food? Will you give me more snuggles? Can I sit by the heater? We're cool." She had nothing to say. Whereas, the first cat I told you about, he loved working with clients when I had an office in my home and, which was many years ago now, but he loved working with clients. He loved communicating with me. He loved kind of showing me and teaching me how to communicate with animals. He was really helpful for me to develop that skill.
Yeah, it is interesting because I have met some animals when in my communications where like I'll have people come to me and they're so excited to get to know more about their cat and like they hear some of the reviews I've given where sometimes because when I meet animals, it's almost like I am learning every animal communication I give. I'm learning. I've been actively doing it for about 2 years, but I was doing it all through my childhood. I'm where you hear stories about people who are doing it all through their childhood, got conditioned to believe that none of that is true, and then forgot about it until one day they decided to just like try it again. It was undeniable. That's more or less my story. And I will meet the animal's like highest self. And that was like my first experience with animal communication. And I was doubting it left and right because I was like, I could be making all of this shit up. Like, it's very easy to make all this shit up. So anyway, some of my reviews are like, "Oh, I met, my animal's highest self and we have a soul contract and blah, blah, blah." And then some people bring their animal to me and I'm like, well, I'm just getting that they really like their food. They don't really like your they'll like ask specifically like, do they like my boyfriend? And I'll be like, they don't really care about him. They're just like, as long as you pet me, I'm cool. So yeah, it is interesting to get those because it is just like people. And so
animals are people.
Yeah, animals are people. I did look up the definition of person once when I was really like, I was like, animals are people and person has the definition. It has human in the definition.
I reject that definition. And I say, for those of us who work with energy, I reject it. Animals have personhood. Yeah, but this is not the first or the last time I've rejected an official definition of a word. I'm not going to lie. I reject it wholeheartedly with the arrogance of somebody who's never looked it up.
Yeah. I would love like a separate book from the dictionary of just words that are rejected by you.
Yeah, thank you. I will work on that because
yes,
that sounds like a fun zine.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about animals, did you say they're personhood or peoplehood?
Personhood. Yeah.
And do you think that has to do with the fact that some of them have very strict boundaries, and that is, I mean, it has to do with a lot of different things, obviously personality traits and this and that, but like for some reason the boundaries is coming up for me, and like how sometimes they have very strict boundaries, sometimes they have absolutely no boundaries, and like that just adds to their personhood.
Yeah, I mean, I I usually just think of it as the capacity to feel and have preference, to have need and desire for me is personhood. It's a preference is personhood to me is a lot of it. So yeah, I have definitely interacted with animals who don't really want to interact with me. I've interacted with animals who are boring and mean and all things and nice and concerned and like all the things. And
Mhm.
I think a big misconception that I run into that people have is like that animals, like whenever I reference speaking with animals, they're like, well, what does your cat say? And it's like, well, that's what it's like saying, what does your boyfriend say? Or what does your mom say? Like a lot of things, a lot of them are personal, but it's not usually for me, an experience where it's just like a specific one thing. It's an oversimplification, because I think people in some way are ambiguous about the personhood of their animal friends or the animals around them. I mean, I've communicated with cockroaches, didn't enjoy it, but I've done it. And they have personhood. I
Mhm.
mean, kind of like the Borg has personhood, but still personhood, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I guess I spend time thinking, I guess I more or less believe that my higher self, when I'm not in this body, decided to incarnate. And all the lives that I've lived, some part of me was like, all right, I'm ready to go do the human thing now. I'm ready to go into the lower dimensions, feel my emotions and shit. And I also believe that animals more or less choose the same thing.
Mm.
And I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because you are also a medium.
Yeah.
And I have found too, in my research, I see a lot of people that are both animal communicators and mediums. And I think that there is like, it feels like the same plug into a channel that varies a little bit differently. So anyways, there's a lot of questions wrapped into this one, but have you communicated with like a higher self of an animal? Or what does that look like for you? What's your language around that? Other than like, oh, the personality of my dog Kilo is that he likes his belly scratched and I don't know, long walks on the beach.
I actually don't. So some of this is a little bit semantics, but I don't resonate with the idea of like higher self. I try not to overthink about higher self, lower self, because it feels
Mhm,
hierarchical
mhm,
um and I I really resonated with those concepts when I was first coming into spirituality. But in the end, I ended up like it's something I struggle with because I find being in a meat suit to be a whole pain in the ass.
mhm,
I'm much more comfortable in the spiritual realms. But the human condition, the cat condition, the ladybug condition, whatever it is, it's a material condition. And I find it harder than the spiritual stuff myself. So it's like complicated to call it higher or lower. Anyway, so that's like a total aside slash slightly relevant. I don't with people who are alive, and I say people to mean like animals, cats, whatever, animals and cats. Cats are my favorite, so I'm referring to cats a lot. I spend my morning chatting with my cats. But when I'm communicating with cats, it's always just I'm communicating with that person,
mhm,
or with the animal, with their person. I personally don't speak to them like on a like higher spiritual level or anything. I just talk to who they are and what they want, what they need, what they feel, and stuff like that. I don't know if that sounds too simple, but that's what I do. And in terms of the choice to incarnate to a body, I kind of very broadly see it that way, but I honestly don't overthink it because I do have really strong convictions about what happens after we die. And from what I understand from doing mediumship work, it is so outside of my understanding. Like there's like the immediacy of what happens after we die and what we are after we leave the body. And then I see the transition into energy and it outside and something that's so far outside of my capacity to understand as a human that I feel like I have no idea. I've got theories, but I've got no confident idea about like how it comes back around into the meat suits.
Mhm.
So that doesn't sound wrong to me, but it's not like I believe that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You seem like the type of person that believes something once you've personally experienced it.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I've done a lot of mediumship sessions and a lot
Mhm.
of animal communication sessions. I got my 10,000 hours, as they say. And so it's not like I've experienced it in my personal life. It's more that I've experienced it with so many different people from so many different walks of life over the course of so many years. So my convictions are kind of informed by, yes, by experience, but not necessarily personal experience,
Mm.
because to me that's different. I see that with a lot of people are just like, well, this is my experience as an individual. And that's not exactly it. Because when I lose loved ones, I have a really hard time connecting with them in the same way I would for a stranger. It's so much easier with a stranger's lost loved ones, because when you're not when you're not a subject, you can be objective. And
Mhm.
it's so much harder to like parse out the subtleties, because so much of what we're talking about exists on a subtle plane. So not
Mm.
sure if I'm answering your question exactly, because there's all these nooks and crannies in it.
Mhm.
But that's my general broad. And to be fair, I am a triple Capricorn, which means my sun, moon, and rising are all in Capricorn. I am very pragmatic. I am like
Okay.
bonkers pragmatic.
Mhm.
So I'm very concerned with the kind of like here and now, and the material condition, and the modality, the functionality of things, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
It totally makes sense. I was going to ask you what your big three were.
Capricorn,
Um,
Capricorn, Capricorn.
nice.
Yeah.
I'm Libra rising, Cancer sun, Libra moon. So
Radically different, right? And it makes
yeah.
sense, like what we're talking about, how we relate to the work we do is
Mhm.
very different. I mean, I'm all earth and you're air and water, and that makes sense that you're like connecting with higher and I'm like connecting with embodied.
Mhm.
Like we can't make this shit up. It's like we are only going to be able to um I think not we're only going to be able to. We are kind of our best selves when we embody our true selves. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of paths that lead us to the truth. There's a lot of ways of holding truth and engaging with it. So, yeah. Again, as an astrologer, I can't help but see it that way.
It's beautiful. It's like a map to the energy of every experience, like every person that you meet. Um I found it really helpful is literally just like a guide to the energy, but not like not like set in stone, this is the energy, because like I believe humans are fluid and energy is fluid and we are both. And so of course there's
Yeah.
so much room in that. I was wondering, this is probably kind of a dumb question, but I'm still going to ask it. The astrology of animals. What do you think about that? Because it's like sometimes we know their birth time, and when my friends know their dog's birth time, the first thing I think is let's type that shit in and get the birth chart.
I never do that. Never, never, never. And I never do that because astrology is an ancient system, and it is well vetted and researched and resourced for
Yeah.
humans. And here's the thing, when we talk about time, when we talk about like solar seasons, we're talking about time from the perspective of a human experience. A
Mm.
ladybug and a dog and a cat and a fish do not experience time the way we do. And astrology is the study of time. And so to apply our understanding of astrology and time to animals, I think and I don't mean any criticism of you. I know tons of astrologers who do this, but I think it's human hubris. There's a word for it, but I don't like a specific thing when it's like human hubris towards animals. I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
what that word is right now, but I am not a fan of it. So I never ever have looked at the astrology of any of my animal friends.
Yeah.
And when people ask me to do it, because of course people ask me to do it, I always say, no.
I don't think I've ever actually done it myself, but I have had, you see, I was listening to one of your interviews just about astrology memes all over and kind of distorting the actual teachings of astrology and how ancient it is, because I have a friend of mine who's not into it at all, and so much I like to listen to like astrology, like weather reports, about, and it's from astrologers that I trust, because actually from listening to a couple of your interviews, it heightened my level of discernment when I'm reading different things about astrology on the internet,
That's
because
great.
you can really get so bombarded with all the information that's out there. And then I mean, then you have biases about like certain signs and certain times of year and things like that. And I actually believe that like I am a sovereign autonomous being, and so I get to decide what energy affects me and what does not. Like it's all my choice, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And some of that didn't resonate really early on, when they
Yeah.
talk, oh, it's Virgo season or it's this season or that season. And like sometimes the subtle energies of the seasons do affect me, especially when it's Cancer season, baby. I feel it and I feel good. Like a Cancer
Right.
full moon, I'm like, and people that maybe don't have any water in their chart, or they have more difficult Cancer placements, challenging Cancer placements, I might hit them a different way, but for me, I feel empowered. So there is stuff like that. But yeah, just having that discernment.
In my work, I almost never talk about, so I do like astrology weather reports on my weekly podcast. But I almost never talk about the solar seasons because
Mm.
I barely notice them. And there's such saturated content out there. I just feel like it's a dime a dozen. A baby astrologer somewhere right now is making a video about the solar season we're in. Like there's
Mhm.
no lack of that stuff. And it is tricky because on the one hand, there's good reason for it. Some of that reason is like, it's very simple. The sun, there's no wiggle room to the sun. It's a degree a day. It's a degree a day. So you don't need to have any astrology and from like background and no technical background in order to track the sun. But the other reason why is the sun is it's your identity and it's your sense of self and it's where you shine. And so it's where a lot of people focus because it's like, see me, validate me. I want to be
Mhm.
seen. So that's part, the two main reasons in my view about why the sun stuff gets so popularized. But
Mhm.
I'm really interested in using astrology as a vehicle for healing and for navigating life choices and cultivating emotional intelligence and
Mhm.
understanding inherited issues and coping with them, making good choices based on your nature and your circumstances. And the sun is not inherently a tool for that. It's absolutely one of the tools in the toolkit, but it's not like the one of the bigger tools in the toolkit. So there's so much of what I talk about, and I always am happy when I get to like unpack it more, like I'm doing here instead of like on a quickie video. But um, when it's kind of like when you get into sun sign astrology, it's like eating sweets. They're delightful. You want more, but it's not a full nutritious spectrum situation. Like at a certain point, it becomes bad for you. And
Mhm.
at first, it is not bad for you. At first, sweets are the bee's knees. They're delicious. They are delightful. They are wonderful. But you can't just do that if you want it to be healthy. And I think a lot of us I think the problem is a lot of people really want to use astrology to make life decisions, but they don't want to think that hard and they don't want to be too critical in their thinking. And I think that those people are not going to vibe with me because I'm a triple fucking Capricorn and I'm all about reality. That's my jam.
I resonate less and less with my Cancer sun. And I think that so many things that you see, the really basic definitions of Cancer, I'm really tired of seeing: the nurturer, the mother, the
Yeah.
homemaker.
Yeah.
Because while I do obviously embody some of that just in my personality as Ashley, that's not like who I am. And I think you're right. So many people, and it's like, I don't even care when I meet people, when they tell me their sun sign, it's like, it's a tease. Like, I feel like I know nothing about you still.
Yeah, I tend to block out that information pretty quickly. And when I'm good friends with people or I'm partnered with someone, I've been with my partner now for a decade, I still can't tell you his whole birth chart because it's not for a lot of reasons, with my partner, but with friends, it's like there's two things I really want to say. The first one is when we learn about someone's astrology, even me, who's, I've been a practicing astrologer since 1994. When we learn about someone's birth chart, and especially if you're not that good at astrology yet, but even if you're amazing, right? What you're doing is you're trying to bypass getting to know someone and showing up with someone and be like, oh, I know about them because they've got Mars and Gemini. It means X. I don't have to really worry about them being not calling me back because they're this. It's trying to bypass cultivating true intimacy and closeness. When we already have intimacy and closeness, that's when you want to bring astrology in to help to fortify what you understand, give you a different perspective, and also help direct you in like, how do you need to behave in order to be authentic so that you can be in a relationship that either works or doesn't because of all that. And then the other thing that I wanted to say now, the fucking stereotypes about astrology. Yes, mother, nurturer, homemaker for Cancer. For Capricorn, it's like capitalist, heart of stone kind of person. I personally am an anti-capitalist whose spiritual work is my life's work. And, I am all about cultivating emotional intelligence and giving tools for people in that regard. And I'm very nurturing. These stereotypes are based on the very surface that applies to the widest number of people, but they're also based on stereotypes that have existed in the 70s. And in the 70s, the stereotypes that existed in the 50s. And guess what? In 2021, we have moved beyond so many of the like limitations that society has placed on us. And so some of these stereotypes, nay, most of them, are some bullshit that we've inherited from patriarchal, capitalistic, mishmash. I said mishmash because I just thought we know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take. If we want to use astrology as a true tool for healing, which not everyone does, to be fair, but if we do, we have to be willing to be critical thinkers and cultivate greater critical thought, IMO, and also have more bandwidth for difference, because I think having different opinions is a really exciting and interesting thing. And I don't think it's like a insult or a negative thing, but a lot of people in the spiritual world do. They're like, if you don't see it my way, then the way you're seeing it is an offense to me. And and I've never encountered that before online stuff, like through the internet. And it makes me sad. So if anyone's listening, it's like, yeah, I see it differently than either of of us are saying. It's like, cool. So you're different. Okay, that's all. That's there's like right and wrong, but there's also just different.
Yeah.
So all the damn things.
I think about that a lot in the spiritual community, and it's really frustrating because I feel like part of why we come together in a community of weirdos, which I'm taking the word weirdo back. We come together is to get away from people that are like, if you don't agree with me, you got to get out. It's like, let's start something else. And it's frustrating to see. I understand why like capitalistic and patriarchal ideals are sinking into all of the communities, because it just shows how ingrained it is in, at least I can speak for America, in the American society. So I understand that, and I can hold space for that, but it still is disappointing to see. And I sit back and I'm like, aren't we all just trying to get away from those kinds of judgments? And aren't we all just coming together to like be weird and to like heal together and to learn together?
Yeah.
And but I'm like chronic bigger picture, and sometimes it's frustrating because I'm like, I'm angry about this thing, but let me zoom out and I can see all the sides. And so I'm constantly torn, and I've always been that way. So I see it, but it's still frustrating. And I love having conversations like this, because it's like, let's just be fucking real with one another. And yeah, I mean, can we disagree and also, God, I wanted to say some cheesy shit like love each other at the same time,
mean, why not respect each other? It's such a Capricorn way of me approaching it. But like, can't we just disagree and not lose respect or take it as a personal attack, or feel the need to like, this is the thing that happens online all the time. It's like, someone you like and respect says something and you disagree with it. And then you think, well, I have to tell them about my disagreement. And I just think sometimes it's okay to be like, oh, that's a different perspective, and move along.
Yeah.
And I think people have a hard time with that, especially marginalized communities, whether it's marginalized in any number of ways, because we expect so much more from the people we trust, because we have so many fewer people that we can trust in the public eye. And I think it's about, again, being able to really look at like, okay, so our reactions are a lot of times meaningfully about ourselves. And it's kind of, again, this is me being like a healer mouth, but like, if we prioritize being interested in our own reactions, then we can parse out what is my reaction versus my response, because the reaction is so much about kind of so much of our own triggers and history. And our response is more intentional. It's like, okay, well, this is how I feel about it, but this is actually objectively just someone else's fucking opinion and nothing to do with me. They don't know me. They're a stranger on the internet. And I just think that that approach takes more time and energy and intentionality than a lot of people have the bandwidth for in their busy days and lives. And also because people don't want to do shit, which I respect.
Yeah. I see a lot of that stuff as I see fear that comes up in so many different ways. And that, like, when I see people that are just like, oh, you're disagreeing with me, now I must attack you. It's a fear response. And it can be a fear for a number of different reasons. But once I like put that together in my own mind, and then like had put on my glasses of like, oh, I can see people's reactions coming from fear, I was able to hold space for them more rather than getting fucking mad when they were just like mean, It's like, why are you just being mean? Because like sometimes, I grew up thinking that like nobody liked me and everybody was mean to me. And so it's like, sometimes I'm like, can we just stop being mean? And then I'm like, okay, wait, like now that I've healed some of my shit, I can see that they're afraid and I take it less personally, and then we can move on. But yeah. And what like a temperature check of like your emotional health in that moment. And it is just so, I think it's such a beautiful tool to see like, oh, I'm pissed. And oh, I kind of want to like hurt you right now with like words, and to see that and then take a step back and be like, okay, this is definitely my shit. Yeah. I saw a lady in a restaurant the other day, and she was so pissed about like, she got confused about the menu. And she was telling it to the waitress. And then the waitress was like, oh, yeah, you just got confused. And she was pissed at the waitress for her own confusion. And I'm like, oh, you're just so like, you're afraid of seeming dumb, or you're afraid of like not getting your needs met or something. And then anyways, it's like sometimes I have to like rear it in. I'm like, okay, stop paying attention to that table over in the corner, Ashley, or at lunch with your family. What'd you say, Grandma? Like just rein it back in, not trying to read the fucking room. But yeah. I'm just really glad to like take it back. I'm really glad that you don't do astrology for animals, to rein all the way back to that.
Because that's what I was like, how did we get here? Yes, no, I don't do astrology for animals. True story. It's yes.
Yeah, I do also think that is dumb. And I don't know if those are the words that you said, but I mean,
you call it dumb, but it's not for me. Yeah.
It's also not for me. Yeah. I love talking to a triple Capricorn. You might be the first triple Capricorn, because me, I'm just like, let's just flow, man. And sometimes I'm like, Ashley, focus.
Focus is not a problem for me. I have lots of energy for focus. And it's not very common to meet a person who has all the big three in one sign. So, in my life, I've only ever met one other triple Capricorn.
Yeah. And I mean, how many birth charts do you think you've done?
Charts. So yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to know, I'm always interested in asking people like how their abilities come through. And I know we touched on that a little bit with you saying that you could hear your animals, and sometimes they send pictures, or animals that you communicate with. And I am curious, like how when you're tapped in and you're giving a mediumship reading or talking to dead people, how does that you hear them? Do you feel them? Do you see them? Do they communicate in pictures? What does that look like for you?
It looks several different ways, and it depends on whether or not it's in session, in a consultation. In the context of COVID, being a medium has been incredibly difficult. And are you a medium as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if this has been your experience as well, but yeah, I've been invaded by desperate, devastated, dead people in numbers that are unlike anything I even conceived was possible. It's been really, really difficult. And in that situation, they just jump in my body, and it's awful and terrible, and I hate it, if I'm being honest. But when I'm sitting down with a client to communicate with their lost loved ones, I used to just have them hop in my body. That's how I've worked for many years, because it's easiest for me. It's just like, it's instant. I get kind of like all levels of information. I get their physical sensations. I get their addiction. I get their attitudes. I get so much more information so much quicker. And it took a toll on my physiological health. after doing this for a long time. And so in the last probably like 7 years, I've trained myself to not have them come in the body. COVID's fucked that up, unfortunately. But COVID is special. And so the way that I get information, it varies. Sometimes I smell things. Sometimes I'll hear things very like I hear them. Generally, the way that I describe mediumship and also animal communication is that it's kind of like, do you listen to like Beyonce ever?
Yes.
Okay. I used to use this as an example with Led Zeppelin. That's how old I am. But now I've switched to Beyonce, even though I actually don't listen to Beyonce. Okay. So you know that song Lemonade?
Yes.
Okay. So when I asked you that question, you probably had an image of the music video, iconic. You probably had a feeling associated with that song or your memories. And then also you may have heard like a refrain of the song, like part of the song in your mind. That's how mediumship is for me, and even animal communication is for me. It's this full-bodied, full-sensed experience. So I'm not seeing with my eyes, I'm not hearing with my ears, but I'm seeing and hearing, much like, your associations with the song that is powerful and that well. So that's the way I describe it. And I really love working as a medium. I'm not loving this whole COVID experience, but yeah.
I love the way that you defined your experience there, because it seems accessible so that other people can be like, oh yeah, I'm having the same experience. Because I believe that being an animal communicator, being a medium, being a psychic, whatever definition you want to put on yourself or on me, I think that we all are capable of tapping into this energy and tapping into the channel. It just takes some trust and I'm sure that because you said that you didn't start, I've listened to another interview of yours where like your ability sort of came online around your solar return, around you said
Saturn
30
return.
Saturn return. Sorry. Yeah. Your Saturn return. Yeah. And I'm 28. I'll be, and I saw in my chart that my Saturn comes back right when I'm 29. Cause I was like 28 starting to get a little weird. And I was like, fuck, that Saturn's coming back, isn't it? I feel pretty good about the Saturn return, but anyways, we could talk about that. But yeah, for me, it was so much trusting that I'm not making all of this up, and just really, and that allowing my abilities to come in was really healing for myself too, because when I believe something, whether it's in my body, it's in my physical body, it's in my energetic body, it's intuition, whatever, when I know something, can I hold that to be my truth when nobody else is agreeing with me, when nobody else sees it? And it was a really scary thing, because I think in my childhood, I always looked around for everybody to tell me who I was at a young age. I don't know exactly why I did that. I mean, children do that. But I feel like that's a memory that I've carried with me into like when I was like an older child too. So I was like, oh, when my mom tells me that I'm a follower or something, I'm like, oh, well, I didn't see it in my mind. That's your perspective. And that's not true for me. And so even as like in my mid 20s, I was looking to readers to tell me about my abilities, so right when I first like had an awakening, and I'm using air quotes, I paid so much money. I was just throwing money at people. I was like, tell me who I am. And when the readings weren't consistent, and then I had like a crisis, because I was like, well, this reader that I trust told me that I'm this, and this reader that I trust told me something completely different. And then I was like, oh, I get to decide who I am. I get to decide who I am, even in a like energetic way, and what my like path might be, what my destiny, what my abilities might be. Oh, just because like this medium sees it this way, feels it this way, it conducts their business this way, it does not mean that that's how I have to do it too. And that's a lot of the times when I was doing my animal communication reading starting out, I was insecure because I wasn't getting some basic questions answered that people wanted. It's like again, a lot of it is like, do they want me to bring another animal in? Do they Are they happy with their food? Can you tell me how their health is and things like that? And I really was more hesitant to answer those questions because they were so specific. And when I doubted myself, the channel shut off.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
And it was so frustrating because at the same time where I wanted to like help people, I was like healing myself, learning that like, oh, I can't actually help this person until I just trust myself. And so I was telling you earlier that I get some like crazy fucking messages from these animals. Like I've met animals that are like their soul might come from the fucking underworld. They might come from another star system. And it's like wild shit. And I'm like, okay, let's pump the brakes because this is like people love hearing that shit. But I'm like, I don't want to steer people the wrong way, especially when it comes to the relationship with their animals. And I almost wasn't believing it. And I almost wanted to hold in some of this information I was getting, although I was getting it intuitively. And although I trusted it, I was hesitant. And then I started getting really specific information about the health of the animal, which also made me nervous because I just don't want to fuck up anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm sure that you've experienced this too. But I just trusted myself when I got information. And every time I've trusted myself with the information, I've given it to the person that's asking the questions, it's always spot on. You know, I'm like, oh, I'm getting something about their left leg. It's something about like their front left leg and their paw. And they're like, we literally just burned his paw today or something. And it's like, and so I was like, okay, well, if I'm getting such accurate information about the physical body, then this wild shit that I'm getting must also resonate to some degree. It resonates with me. I should just give the information. Like I shouldn't be sitting here trying to figure out what to give and what not to give when it comes to animal communication. And I know that it might get tricky when it's like sensitive information, but it's also like, I don't know if it's my job to totally discern every information I'm getting when it's not for me. I'm just the channel in which the information is coming through. What is your experience like with that?
With medical stuff, whether it's with humans or animals, even if I've met with somebody 20 times, even if they already know that this is how I feel, I always verbalize, I am not a doctor. Any medical perspective I give you, you need to vet with an actual physician, whether it's a human physician or an animal physician. I think that that's a really important thing to say. Like, I am a psychic. I'm an animal communicator. What the fuck do I know? You need to be a critical thinker. Yeah. And, this is meant to help because I'm also a medical intuitive with humans. So it's like meant to be like one piece, not the piece. Mm-hmm. And so that's one thing I do is I always let people know that if I go in a direction and it's not resonating with a person, I can generally tell whether I'm supposed to push or yield. Sometimes it's wrong. Sometimes it's not, the person's not ready to hear it. And when it comes to animals specifically, I'm trying to think of which part of your question I should respond to. Cause I mean, it's kind of like a broad share and then a smaller question. So yeah, I guess, wait, ground me into the question so I can properly answer it.
Yeah. What, I was asking, like, when you're getting information, when do you decide to discern what to give? And do you because sometimes I read, an article you wrote about mediumship, like 5 years ago, I think. And, you were saying sometimes people are expecting a beautiful message and sometimes it's like, get your shit together and clean your house, Yeah. And so it's like, I mean, even so those messages, you're probably like hesitant,
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm not at all hesitant.
Were you ever?
I'm in a bit of a unique situation because I came into my animal communication skills, my psychic skills, and my mediumship skills, not all at once, but I already had a decade-long private practice of consulting as an astrologer. So I'm in a really unique position because through my private practice, as an astrologer, and astrology is math, right? Astrology is specifically like a system designed to offer answers and strategies. And so I already had a consulting style and ethics. I had kind of like a woo-woo esoteric business already. I had already cultivated a lot of my counseling skills. And I think that that's a lot of what you're talking about, is like, how do I determine what to say when they didn't ask, especially. But I'm really lucky. I didn't realize I was lucky, but I've come to realize that I was really lucky, because as these things started to come in, I would always tell my clients, like, grain of salt, this is what I'm getting. But I had already cultivated the skill of being willing to be wrong, and of not being attached to being right, and of being willing to not have my client like me. Because I think that this is the problem a lot of practitioners get into, is you want people to like you, and you want people to validate you, not just somebody with a people pleaser thing that you described. Like, I think everybody is just like, you don't want to give bad news. You don't want to say something shitty. And I think there's an element of, it is essential to cultivate kind of a methodology of saying, this is what I'm seeing. And I might be, the way I'm interpreting it might be off. I'm not certain, but this is what I'm seeing. But I think it's really important to say specifically what you're seeing, because your interpretation is based on your own life, whereas the client will have a different reference point, right? It's a complicated thing for me. When I don't know the answer, I'm very comfortable to say, I don't know. And I feel like it's not just because I don't know and I don't like to make shit up, but it's also because I really, as a client, like when I go into any practitioner, a doctor, a dentist, a psychic, whatever, and they tell me, I ask a question, they say, I don't know. And they don't fuck around and give me like a roundabout reason they don't know. They just say, I don't know the answer to that question. Sometimes they offer to do some research. Sometimes they don't. I trust them more, because I'm like, okay, you have won my trust, because you're not just blowing smoke up my butt. You're telling me what you can be authoritative with and what you can't. And I think that that's something that comes with practice. And it's also a personality thing. Like, I'm a very direct person, I'm a very direct person. So that is a big part of it too, is I'm comfortable telling people difficult things. And also I'm very driven to help people find not solutions to fix the difficult thing, but solutions to wallowing in the feelings that emerge from that, but instead coming up with strategies. So it's like, okay, so I told you this relationship doesn't look like it's going to last, or your cat fucking hates your boyfriend, or whatever it is. It's like, okay, so first, what are you feeling? Do we need to sit with that? Do we need to work with that? And then second, what are some action steps that make sense to you? Let's unpack it. Let's explore it. And so again, my hyper Capricorn pragmatism is just like, every time something difficult comes up in a session, it's an opportunity to work through not just that individual thing, but the pattern that it's associated with. So that's, it's kind of my happy place, is being able to go there with people, because it's so productive. So yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I was laughing when you were like, well, your question was so broad, and yet there was a little, and I'm like, yeah, sometimes I'm just like willy-nilly. I'm like, just, what do you think about this? And so I was like, okay, Ashley, you're going to rein it in.
Well, it's just, I'm such a Capricorn. I'm a literalist, it drives some people bonkers, but it is what it is,
I like it. It feels grounding to me. Like, it feels like, okay, but what if you were specific? What would happen then? Like, like to me, I'm like, oh, what would happen then if I was specific? And then it's just like, it opens up another door to this conversation and this energy exchange that I wasn't even looking at. And it's like, oh, let's fucking open that door. Let's see what happens. Like, I'm into that. Yeah.
I love it.
I was thinking, okay, recently I gave a reading for a friend who I knew their situation, and I knew kind of what they wanted their cat to feel in this situation. Like, I knew what would work out best for them financially, logistically, whatever. And it was a moment where they asked a question and the answer immediately popped. Like, I heard what their cat's answer was, and I almost wanted to like ask it again, because I was like, you sure you want it to be that answer? Because I know that one's not going to work out for them. And then I could feel my channel being like, bitch, just give the information. And then I've noticed that too with myself when I'm asking my own intuition. There's such a subtle difference in like my projected voice in my head that I want to be true. And it's literally, it's like, I don't know if I'm hearing it in my own voice. I guess it's just the voice of my thoughts, but it's just so subtly different when it's like my intuition and what I want the answer to be. And it's like the volume's a little bit louder with what I want it to be. I'm a little bit more confident with what I want it to be. And then like the real answer is just a little bit quieter and just a little bit further back in my head. It feels like if I had to put it in a location. And that's what it feels like sometimes when I'm giving people information. Like, I'm like, I know this fucks up your plans, but if you want to know what your cat truly desires, then you're going to have to.
What it is. I mean, I think that's the way of doing it. And the way I always explain it to people is that our guidance speaks in neutral tones. So that's a lot of what you're describing. This, like, it's less confident, it's less insistent, because those are overlays that are emotional and personality based. Our guidance is neutral. It is not attached. Our personalities are not neutral. Our personalities are not attached. And that's great. But also the key is to not seek the guidance, but to receive the guidance. And in our world, most people don't have the tools for doing that. They don't have the patience for doing that. But when you're confused, when you're working with a client, they're asking a question that the answer isn't coming readily, it's about not thinking about their needs, but instead receiving your guidance. I think that's always the move, because a lot of times our clients just want us to say what they want to hear. Obviously, I have been that client for many people as well. And I'm always grateful when people don't do that for me, because why pay for a reading if it's just going to be somebody jerking you off? Like, instead, just show up and like be there for whatever it is, and you can reject someone's perspective or advice. But I think, again, when connecting to guidance or trying to communicate with an animal, the key is to not be so eager that we get in our own way. And that's a very difficult thing. And I think it's something that, all people and practitioners work on throughout the course of our lives, is how to be open, present, and not attached all at once. It's a dance. And, sometimes it gets chaotic. Sometimes it doesn't work. But that's the general move, IMO.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it for me, I'm such like a day-to-day person. Like, I can really have beautiful access to my channel for 3 days in a row, and then just like not even have something going on right in my face, but like an emotional trauma, some subconscious shit going on. And then it's all kind of flustered. And it's been a, like you said, a dance and a beautiful challenge in respecting where I'm at. And knowing that in that moment, it's like, my access to my channel isn't great right now. And I don't want to go forward with this in this moment just so that you're not mad at me. Because I have people pleasing tendencies. I think that I was pretty pissed when I read about that with Libra. I'm like, fuck that. I don't have that.
You have a Libra rising? Is that what you said?
And a Libra moon.
Sure. Also, Cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only things you've told me about yourself astrologically, you're going to be very like, if I don't please you, then I'm not safe. So I have to take care of your feelings and needs.
Exactly. And it's been really really cool to help heal and be healed at the same time with the work that I do. And I don't take that for granted. I'm just really grateful for that. Speaking of healing, I really was curious about, I can probably think of different ways that we could do it, and how astrology can be healing. But I wanted to see what like your perspective on that is, because I think all of us to some degree, especially after being isolated for a year, being with ourselves, and then moving into 2021 and feeling like, oh, we're not actually out of the dark of this like healing that we're doing collectively and individually. And so I was just, so many people are interested in astrology. Basically, people know their big three. I'm just curious how astrology is healing for you and the work that you do for people.
So the way that I use astrology is as a counselor. So, to be very clear, I am not a therapist. So I'm not saying a therapist, but as a counselor, I'm not a fortune teller. Some astrologers are. I synthesize the data that is within a birth chart to help people not only cultivate greater self-acceptance and awareness of who they are and where they're at, but also using the chart as a tool for understanding our inherited issues, our ancestry, and how some of our traumas are lived experiences, and some of them are passed down through generations, whether you were raised by your birth parents or not. And understanding that, that kind of part of astrology, for me, it's a centerpiece of my practice, and it has always been. That is part of my connection to medical astrology, looking at immigration issues, class issues, all that kind of stuff. These things all can be read in the chart. And not only is that helpful because it's a stranger, your astrologer, telling you all about these things. So it's the act of being seen is so healing. But also, it's a tool for understanding that our parents or our guardians, even if they were abusive and terrible, they are fucked up, damaged adult people. Not all of us were raised by adults, but people who were doing their best, and their best may be tragic and terrible and wrong, but understanding that everyone has their own inherited traumas. And when they perpetrate abuse and mistreatment, it is not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on them. And being able to see that in the birth chart can be liberating and give us just enough space to recognize that not only is it not that these people who are supposed to love us actually like hate us or wish us harm, which is true sometimes, realistically, but it's about, okay, but I'm here to love me. I'm here to accept me. I'm here to care for me, whether or not I had shitty parents, whether or not I had shitty experiences. And being able to kind of unpack that in an individualized way, give individuals tools for self-care, essentially, that is self-appropriate and sustainable. That to me is where astrology is the most healing. And, there are different levels and layers of healing, where somebody's going to be at, and the level of healing they're capable of at 22 is going to be different than 32 and different than 62, because you're alive more years and you have more accrued experiences. You also have more space from your early developmental experiences. And I think that it's the job of an astrologer, or I should say of myself, because not all astrologers work the way I do. But it is the job of me as an astrologer to meet a person where they're at and to not data dump. And it took me many years to learn how to do this, because at first I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to be like, I can tell you about everything. I can tell you about everyone. I can give you all the tools. And people would stumble out of my office. They couldn't use the information because I data dumped. I gave them too much to emotionally integrate. And so over the course of my private practice and, many years, I have become more attuned to where they are emotionally during the consultation, so that I can moderate the speed at which I offer data so that they can actually integrate it and use it. And that took many years to cultivate that skill. But being able to do that as an astrologer, it's like you get 10 times more information that way. It's like, it sounds counterintuitive because I'm giving less data, but the information that I am giving is integrated. And so it's like planting lots of seeds. They all sprout. Maybe they don't all sprout, but a lot of them sprout. You know what I mean? And that's really so healing and so cool. And then one other kind of part of my answer to that is, using astrology as a tool for understanding and contextualizing issues that are happening in the world can be really helpful and can help activists and concerned people kind of not, again, personalize and fall into hopelessness, but to understand that there is a season and a time for all things. And so we can pace ourselves through the ways in which we are engaged with the world so that we don't burn out in our 20s, which is what a lot of activists do. So those are all kind of really meaningful ways of using astrology that I like to use astrology. And then, I could get really detailed and get into lots of ways, like my specialties with astrology, but very broadly speaking, that's how astrology can be helpful and not helpful, healing.
If somebody wanted to pull out their birth chart that has a basic understanding of astrology, how can they kind of get the healing energy from looking at that without maybe having to spend the money or the time? to work
You
with someone.
can't. I don't think you can.
Mhm.
Listen, someone with a lot of water in the chart is going to be like, just feel the vibes, and then you're going to be healed by the vibes. I don't buy that shit at all. It's a computer printout. That's what it is. Can you be healed by a computer printout? Sure. I'm not going to tell you how to do it because I don't really think that's what astrology is good for. And this is like a growing pet peeve of mine as an astrologer that honestly, I see doctors and nurses are dealing with a lot. Scientists and immunologists are dealing with a lot. You go online and you see like actual like fucking PhDs, immunologists being told in the comment section by people like, you don't actually know anything about it. I mean, you should Google it. And like the first Google result is their work, right? Like there's this, we're in this time where all opinions are great, but some people are more educated about their opinions, and education is valuable. Listen, I didn't go to university. I'm a scholar. I'm not into that. But we have to be able to recognize that astrology works because it is a nuanced, detailed system that one must learn, not absorb, but learn. And I passionately believe this. And I don't feel the same way about psychic ability. I don't feel the same way about animal communication or mediumship because it's different. But astrology is math, and it's applied systems, and it's nuanced, and it's timing, and there are many different ways of using astrology. There are many different systems within astrology. So if you're a beginner, are you going to be able to look at a birth chart and read immigration issues and inherited trauma? Fuck no. If you're an advanced astrologer, can you do those things? Maybe, only maybe. So because I am largely a self-taught astrologer, I didn't have anyone telling me what I could or should do. And I was a real fucking boner killer of a 20-something-year-old. And I moved to San Francisco from Canada when I was 19. And I spent my whole entire 20s hanging out with nerds who are much older than me and studying. That's all I did. I just fucking studied my balls off. And I studied astrology and I practiced with clients and I developed more and more competency in that way. So what I personally did was I taught myself how to read immigration, inherited issues, trauma, coping mechanisms, processing styles, all of this stuff, because it was important to me as an individual and it was important to my clients. And when I started lecturing to other astrologers within the kind of traditional's a funny word for this, but a traditional astrology community. There's a form of astrology called traditional astrology. That's not what I'm referring to. I mean, like the place where astrologers compete. I started lecturing about a decade into my private practice to other astrologers. And that's when I learned that not everyone was doing what I was doing, that my perspective was somewhat unique because of a variety of things. And so this is where a lot of the lectures I've given within the astrology community to, consulting, practicing expert astrologers and students more in the advanced level, a lot of times it's about these topics that I'm naming because it's not what everyone's doing. And it's not like if you're buying a bunch of astrology books, some of them are going to talk about these topics and a lot of them aren't. So this is where it's like, and back to my pet peeve, it's like treating the tools that we turn to with reverence, with respect is hard for people when they're like, but I should just know it. And so people are always like, I don't know why I don't get this yet. And in my head, I'm always like, because you haven't been studying for years. Because it's not intuitive knowledge. It's learned knowledge. That's the annoying thing about astrology. And it's why I stopped teaching. I've taught a couple beginner classes and I'm such a boner killer. I'm just like, you didn't do your homework. You didn't study. You gotta go. There's nothing to do until you've studied. I literally, the last time I taught a class, my partner, who I've now been together with for 10 years, but we were in our first, maybe second year together. He took the class. I kicked him out because he didn't do his fucking homework. Yeah, I kicked him out. And and I have no regrets about that because I really just feel like astrology is worth learning. But if you're not going to learn it, that's cool. There's other systems that are a lot less study. And then just hire an astrologer. I'm sorry if that's an annoying answer, but I'm annoying.
No, it's not. I really respect how much time you have put into this because, you're obviously a professional astrologer, but I think growing up in the era of social media, I've been on social media since, middle school. MySpace came out in middle school. So I've been on it and that's how I've been navigating a lot of my reality for a long time. And like just seeing how many people, I mean, I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for you and for other people who, like, I took a like an intro to astrology at a community college beginning of 2020. It was the 6-week class, and my teacher, he calls himself an astro wizard, and he is like 70 years old, and he taught himself astrology out of giant books that I don't know what they're called. So but he,
Are you referring to an ephemeris?
yes, I think.
Did it look like this?
Yes.
So this is actually the very basic, like if you can't read this, you're not even a beginner. Fun facts.
He was like not even, I think he was like 15 years old and he started teaching himself. And so he's been doing this for a very long time. So he was very traditional. But also you could see that he like married his knowledge of it with his intuition, because he understood that he had both. And it was just really cool to learn from him. And then now I can go back into the world and like not believe every astrology meme. And I kind of get annoyed. You know, there was a time on like my spiritual Instagram where I tried to post like I knew some shit about like a Taurus full moon or something. And then I go back and I read it and I'm like, you don't know shit. You know what I mean? You just felt pressured by like everybody else posting about it. So you should post about it too, because you should know something about it. You know, it's like you're intuitive, know something about it. And it's like, yeah, it's just, I feel like you're both like letting me off the hook with feeling pressure to know it, and then also like putting me on the hook of like, now go learn it for yourself, pick up a fucking book, you know what I mean, of somebody that you trust.
Or don't. And that's the thing, like people are always like asking me questions like this, not exactly like this, but like in this kind of conversation, I'm always like, no one said you had to learn astrology, no one said you had to talk about the fucking full moon. You know, like no, there's, like you said, there's pressure for your generation, probably people 35 and younger, who are just inundated by all this astrology content. But the question to ask yourself is, are you learning from a student? I don't want to learn anything from students. I want to learn from teachers, and I want my teachers to be very experienced and advanced in their study. Why would I learn from a student? And that's like this is a bit of a generational thing, because I've noticed that younger people are like, I want to learn from people of all levels. And when you're cultivating your skill set is not when I want to learn systems from you. I want to learn systems from you when you don't need to check a book, when you don't need to check, when you know what the fuck you're saying, basically. And I know not everybody feels that way, but I really do. And it's no disrespect. We're all beginners at the beginning. There's no, and this is, again, it's like talking about, like, back to earlier part of our conversation. It's like, people get very offended when I say stuff like this sometimes. But again, that's about your reaction, which is about a fear of being wrong. It's about a fear of not being good enough or whatever, instead of being humble about like, oh yeah, I'm just learning something that's really complicated and takes a lot of years. I don't need to teach it. I can talk about it and maybe share that I know more than the people I'm talking about it with, but that's really different than teaching it. And I see a lot of people on social media, on Clubhouse in particular, where I'm just like, oh, honey, everything you're saying is wrong. And I know you feel it, but that doesn't mean it's true. And you're just teaching a room full of people. And it's important that we are critical of who we're listening to. And I don't mean like tearing people down, but like having discernment, you know? And it's a lot of work because there's a lot of fucking content out there, but there's something called con spirituality, and it's real. And in the days of QAnon and con spirituality, we have to be very vigilant and careful that we're not picking up garbage or unintentionally picking up hate speech. And that's just the landscape we're living in now. It's thorny.
Yeah.
I
I am so happy to have come across you and a standard search for animal communicators. So you like popped up and I was like, oh shit, and look at, she's all these other things too. Okay. And then just like being inspired to like carry discernment with me. I mean, I already was learning how to navigate that, but you just offered it in a way of astrology where it is just such a clusterfuck on the internet of who to trust. And to some degree, it's like, okay, well, what resonates with me? And what resonates with me is, like you were talking about, is somebody who is not just confident, because confidence is fleeting, and it's like,
It's a personality thing. Confidence means you have fire in your chart, or your sun's close to the ascendant. You know what I mean? Like, confidence is an easy Mars aspect. Confidence is not competency. And I think that it's easy to be pulled in by charisma. Some of the most charismatic astrologers I know are not the best ones. They're the ones I enjoy hearing talk, but I'm not necessarily learning more than the awkward ones. Sometimes the most awkward people who are not confident at all have the most to fucking say. They're the ones you should shut up and listen to. Not you personally, but we should shut up and listen to. And so I think that's a really important point. You know, it's social media bends towards the charismatic. And for better or worse, you know, a lot of times for worse.
Yeah. My astrology teacher was so awkward. He was just always so awkward, like fumbling over shit, but I trusted him. And I was just so like, everybody else in the room, I felt like there were other people in the room that were just like trying too hard to make something, and maybe they had been practicing astrology and this and that. And I was like, I just like he wears the same vest every day. He doesn't give a fuck what you think about him. He's up there hanging up posters upside down and just saying that it has something to do with his like Scorpio or something. I don't know what he was saying, but he was just like, throw that out there. He's like, I don't know. It's just who I am. And, but he was just so confident. No, not confident. We're not going to use that word. Competent about what he knew, and just excited to teach it to us. And I'm just really excited to have met you, who knows what the fuck you're talking about. You've put a lot of time into astrology, and you know, it's just, man, I cannot imagine how, like we said earlier, just you scrolling through and just seeing so many people being misguided and about something that's so like close to you, you know. I feel that way sometimes about like animals, the way people think that they should be training their dog. And like because I have a basic understanding of dog training from jobs that I've had. And I'm just like, you're so misguided. And like somebody suffers from this false information being out there.
That's the problem. Yeah. It's not just the individual dog that suffers, or like the individual reading it or whatever. This is where I go big picture. And I think about this as a societal issue where it used to be that we'll just talk about American society would kind of glorify the expert in a way that was maybe like cult-like and wrong, you know? And now we've gone the opposite direction, where everybody's opinion, whether it's informed or not, is equal to the expert in the room. And that's a problem too. We must cultivate critical thinking and to check sources. And, you know, what I'm always telling people about astrology, and I think it goes for any spiritual content, if you aren't seeing like an expert or a practitioner sourced as like the writer, the speaker, the whatever, the creator of that content, don't trust it. Don't trust it. Because that means you know, that's already a problem in my mind. Like there's a lot of, for instance, specifically astrology accounts where you don't know who fucking wrote that astrology shit. And that's how you know it's just a corporation who's selling you astrology. And hey, maybe you're cool with that. Me, not a fan. I'm not like anti, but I'm not a fan, you know? And I want my astrology to come from experts. I want my animal communication to come from somebody who's actually an animal communicator, and not somebody who's pontificating about it based on their theory instead of their experience, you know? And I think that, you know, I say all these things, and these are my preferences and my perspective, and also want to reiterate for anyone listening, you know, I hold space for people to feel different. You know, you have different experiences. I am 46 years old. I am not, you know, 29 years old or whatever. Like we all get to have different feelings about different things. But I will say that the popularization of psychic phenomenon, of talking about empaths and empathy and animal communication and astrology, it's not the first time in history that these things have been popular. And what happens historically is the silification of these things. They're made into jokes. They're made into now memes. They're made by often well-meaning people. They're made into products that you wear or you buy. And then eventually it just is made silly by all of this. And then, you know, religious or corporate entities, or sometimes governmental entities, squash them. That's what's happened historically. Now, that may not happen again because of the internet. And, you know, the power of the individual within the internet, but it may. And this is again where like a lot of older astrologers are very suspicious and annoyed by, and when I say older, I mean meaningfully older than me, are very annoyed by astrology online these days because they've lived through the 70s and the backlash that happened to the popularity of astrology in the 70s. So just some fun facts, because I fear, okay, and this is the last thing I'll say on my little rant. I notice that Gen Z, and there's also Y, but Ys are still very young. Gen Z is a generation that has less intergenerational connections than any generation before it. This is a theory I have.
Okay.
And this is actually a lot because of the internet, because you don't have to interact with anyone of a different generation. You can just talk shit about them. And then when you talk shit about them, those people get defensive of you and they don't want to interact with you. And then bing bong, it's done. And I think it's a real fucking shame, because if we're not engaging with people of different ages, we're missing out on so much. And in particular, if you're not interacting with people older, you're missing out on the wisdom they've accrued that you can actually benefit from. So I am like anyone, especially woo practitioners, have friends who are younger, have friends who are older, no practitioners with less experience, no practitioners with more experience. Like, make sure to have that kind of beautiful flow that happens when we share our experience, share our knowledge, and share our unique struggles, but from different vantage points in our development and in our lives. Again, I know it's very Capricorn of me, but it had to be said. So I said it.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, because I wholeheartedly agree. I had no idea that, like, statistically they were not connecting with.
I don't know if it's statistically, I haven't researched that. I have so Pluto and Sagittarius, it's that generation.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, it's a Pluto and Sagittarius crisis. And the only research I've done into it is by asking individuals, and they're always like, yeah, I don't have a lot of friends who are a lot older than me or not in my generation.
Yeah.
Whereas when I was growing up, I did. Everyone I knew did. Like, it was very normal, because we couldn't rely on the internet, where you could find millions and billions of people who are your age and agree with you. You know, you couldn't do that before. You had to interact with the people who were in front of you.
Yeah.
It's a different world, for better and for worse. I know I say it a lot, but it's worth acknowledging. So yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We're at an hour now. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your book that you put out, and then your podcast, so that people know, like, and then we'll talk about where to find you and stuff like that.
Great. Thank you. So I do have a book. It's an astrology book called Astrology for Real Relationships. And it is unique in a couple ways, other than it's hella cute. It is broken into 3 sections: friendships, early stages of dating, and then long-term committed relationships. And a lot of astrology books ignore friendship, and they ignore that, like, wait, what's happening? Are we dating? Are we hooking up? What's happening here stage? They just focus on like serious connection or flirting.
Yeah.
And so this is like, you know, my embrace of platonic love and of situationships, basically. And also, it's not just based on sun signs. It's all of the planets through all of the houses and all of the signs in the context of friendship. And then the same thing in the context of early stages dating, and then long-term relationships. And it is embracing of queerness in gender and in sexuality and in relationship structure. So it is not an old school astrology book, but it is delightful. So you can get it. It's called Astrology for Real Relationships. And my podcast is out every Sunday. It's called Ghost of a Podcast. And on it, in the first half, I answer a listener question. It's usually astrology. Sometimes I do mediumship, and sometimes I do animal communication. And then in the second half of the episode, I do the astrology weather report for the 7 days ahead. And in it, I just break down all the transits of the week, how it's going to feel, how it is likely to impact us both personally, but also socially and politically. So if you are not into those things, don't listen to it. But if you are, Ghost of a Podcast can be heard everywhere. And I have free transcripts on my website. So yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. Isn't it weird that people listen to podcasts that they hate just so they can talk shit?
It is weird. I can't imagine having that much time to waste.
Or just the like attention span.
I don't have it.
because I definitely don't have it.
No, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I often say that in my own podcast, especially when I was first starting out and I was like insecure, and I'm like, whatever criticism you have of me, I already have of myself, so keep it to yourself. Thank you very much.
It's tricky. People really like to share, which, you know, it is what it is. Sometimes I've gotten negative feedback. I'm grateful that I haven't had that much abusive shit from my podcast, but I've certainly taken some kind of critical feedback and being like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Or, I do need to speak to this. This is important. But again, it takes being able to sort through the immediate reaction to get to the integrity response. That's the fucking work, being a human.
Because a lot of times my first reaction is bitch. And then I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But how do I actually feel? But it's almost like a game I play with myself, because I like that that's an aspect of my personality where I am that like kind of with myself. And then the other part, I'm like, okay, I'm going to zoom out.
Gotta zoom out.
Gotta zoom out. Awesome. And then can you tell people, I mean, I'll link your website and your Instagram in the show notes, but people can find you. Can you tell them where they can find you?
So my website's lovelanyadoo.com, and there's articles and videos, and I think I still have podcast episodes up there from other guest appearances I've done. And I even had a little TLC show for a minute, astrology show. Some videos are on there. And you can join me on Patreon, where I teach tarot, astrology, and I'm right now about to start a series where I answer my patrons' questions about mediumship and animal communication. So that's going to happen for the next couple of months. And so patreon.com/Jessica Lanyadoo. On Instagram, I'm making lots of videos where I am planets. I'm describing the transits as a planet. And it is bringing me so much joy. It's just, you know, it is a joyful thing for me as a Capricorn. Creepy and tender, it's like my sweet spot of like aesthetics and stuff. I just find it to be really funny. So if you don't like seeing talking about a Venus opposition to Chiron, don't go there. But if you do, you will be charmed.
And you're also often fruits and vegetables and
yes.
loaves of bread.
Compost. I'm a lemon a lot of times. I haven't been an orange. Oh, I've been an orange, an apple, bananas. I don't want to list all the fruits and vegetables I've been, but a lot.
I need all of them listed. Sent to me.
I have so many things I'm yet to be. I mean, I use a lot more of my filtered videos on Patreon, like a lot, and they are so funny because I've been doing this thing where I answer, so I'll like have a topic and then all my patrons can ask questions, and instead of me doing a live where I can only get to some of their questions, I answer all the questions, and I just drop a bunch of different videos where I answer each question. And with each question, I answer it as a different thing. So I'll be like a blob of jelly, and then I'll be like a gerbil, and then I'll be a puff of rain. It's just really entertaining for me, and it makes it easier to organize the information for people. I hope. It's also distracting for some people, I'm sure, but I like it.
And your two tiers I love it's puppies and kittens.
Yeah, because in fact, I kind of stopped doing this because of Patreon, but I used to always call people puppies and kittens. I'd be like, hey, puppies and kittens, what's up on the podcast? And then after I started really doing Patreon, I was like, oh, puppies and kittens are specific people. So I can't call just anyone puppies and kittens anymore.
Yeah.
I got to call my puppies, and my kittens. Yeah.
It's like less like what content I want access to and like what I identify with more, you know, when the choice is in front of me, I'm like, fuck. Well,
that's real / also the kittens is where I do all the videos. So be a kitten.
So you want to be a kitten.
Yeah, you want to be a kitten. I'm a cat person, so I gave that to the kittens, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you know, I definitely have way more questions for you, but I'm just so happy that we got to sit down and do this. Thanks so much for coming on.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation. It's been really lovely.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Let's just do this for 10 minutes.
You're welcome.
Okay.